In gergo tecnico si chiama asset allocation, una specie di dogma, di formula sacra. I libri ci dicono: devi dividere tutto, devi diversificare. Azioni, obbligazioni, materie prime, criptovalute. Devi creare delle caselle, delle categorie e devi riempirle. Come se investire fosse un esercizio di contabilità, una pratica da manuale. Tutti lo fanno. Tutti tranne loro. Dicono che il mondo della finanza moderna ha delle regole e loro quelle regole semplicemente le ignorano. Già, perché se guardi dentro la loro creatura, la Berkshire Hathaway, non la trovi questa mappa ordinata. Non c'è. E la cosa più strana, la cosa che fa impazzire tutti i grandi hedge fund ed investitori è che loro pensano di avere ragione. Salve a tutti, Marco Casario qui e sono l'autore del libro Investire nel breve e medio termine, i 4 pilastri dell'indipendenza finanziaria. E da investitore privato che da 20 anni bazzica e studia i mercati finanziari, e quando guardo a loro due, Warren Buffett e Charlie Munger, beh, per loro l'equazione è diversa, è quasi brutale nella sua semplicità. Loro non hanno una rete di sicurezza. Se l'azienda va male, i soldi che perdono sono i loro soldi, il loro patrimonio, tutta la loro vita. Non c'è una commissione fissa che li aspetta alla fine del mese o alla fine dell'anno. Non vengono pagati per spendere i soldi, vengono pagati se i soldi li fanno. In questo video ho raccolto e condensato le dichiarazioni più importanti di questi due investitori storici e se arriverai fino alla fine di questo video capirai il cuore della loro filosofia di investimento completamente controintuitiva, che però ha costruito un impero e che potrebbe cambiare per sempre il tuo modo di vedere il denaro. Sì, perché immagina di avere miliardi di dollari liquidi, lì, fermi, una montagna di cash. E la strategia principale sarebbe quella di non fare assolutamente nulla. Sembra una follia, vero? Eppure è esattamente quello che sta succedendo in questo momento a Omaha, nel Nebraska. Loro guardano il mondo finanziario e vedono una festa a cui hanno deciso di non partecipare. Perché? Beh, per capirlo dobbiamo smontare pezzo per pezzo il dogma della loro asset allocation. Vi lascio a queste dichiarazioni che ho sapientemente raccolto per voi.
Well, if you look at Berkshire, you will find that it really doesn't do much of conventional asset allocation to categories. We are looking for opportunities, and we don't much care what category they're in. And we certainly don't want to have our search for opportunities governed by some predetermined artificial bunch of categories. In this sense, we're totally out of step with modern investment management, but we think they're wrong.
And incidentally, we have 80% of our money or more, well over 80%, tied to this country and to the dollar. So it's not like we've left the country or anything of the sort.
But when have you done a big asset allocation strategy?
Never.
Yeah. And I want you to remember one of my favorite sayings as you do this asset allocation. If a thing's not worth it doing at all, it's not worth doing well.
Charlie and I are at a disadvantage in buying businesses because we have almost all of our net worth in the downside as well as the upside. So, if we had a 2% fee and 20% of the profits and a good buy kiss for the losses, that's a different equation that exists at Berkshire. We run it as if it's 100% our money, which it is close to 100% of our net worth, and we will own the downside, and we don't get paid for spending the money, we get paid for making money.
Yeah, I don't think any of the businesses that have sold to us over the years, which are run by the kind of people we like being associated with, would have wanted to sell to a hedge fund. So there is a class of assets out there that doesn't want to deal with hedge funds or private equity funds. Thank God.
I'm one of these doctors that really doesn't know anything about money or finance. The money comes in, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm not able to really evaluate the financial strength of a company, but I can evaluate the ethical strength of the company, and that's why I feel real comfortable, I think most of us here, having our savings in Berkshire Hathaway. And
Thank you.
This question has probably been asked in different ways already, but several years ago, a fellow I know who had been manager of Magellan Fund warned that we were going to have a terrible decade or so in the stock market because of all the things people have brought up so far, the increasing interest rates and runaway spending and decreasing dollar and stagflation may be right around the corner, Social Security problems, and even what Charlie Munger referred to is that most of our best and brightest graduates, I find, are going into money management rather than they're not becoming doctors or molecular biologists or PhDs in chemical engineering. And so in view of the fact that a year or two ago, there was still an ebullience of emotion about the stock market going up and making everyone rich just by having their money in the stock market, it seems like that ebullience has dropped, and I'm hearing in anticipation of a bear market. And you wrote, I think several years ago, that it's hard to make money in a bull market, and the real opportunities come in a bear market. So I'm wondering if you would give us a clue as to what your strategies are going to be if it's really true that the market gets dismal over the next few years.
Well, if the market gets cheaper, we will have many more opportunities to do intelligent things with money. Now, whether we'll blow on the money in the meantime or something is another question. But you know, we are going to be buying things, one thing or another, operating businesses, stocks, high yield bonds, whatever. We're going to be buying things for as long as I live. Just like I'm going to be buying groceries.
Longer than that, Warren.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Charlie is just waiting to take over after we're not good at forecasting markets. Knew that we were getting enormous bargains in the mid 70s. We knew that the market went crazy to some extent in the late 90s, but we don't have much, we don't spend any time, Charlie and I spend no time thinking or talking about what the stock market is going to do, because we don't know. We do know sometimes that we're getting very good value for our money when we buy some stocks or some bonds, as it may be. But we are not operating on the basis of any kind of macro forecasts about stocks. And there's always a list of reasons. You gave a few. There's always a list of reasons why the country will have problems tomorrow, but there's always a list of opportunities which don't get mentioned quite as often. So we don't sit down and make a list of the bad things that are happening in the economy and the good things that are happening, and therefore expecting the stock market. It might not. It doesn't behave that way, even if you could correctly forecast some of the bad things or good things. Overall, I'm an enormous bull on the country. I mean, over time, this is the most remarkable success story in the history of the world, if you think about it. I mean, in 1790, we had less than 4 million people in this country. There were 290 million people in China. There were 100 million people in Europe. You know, and they all had the same intellect we had. They were in the same general climate. They had lots of natural resources. And 215 years later, those 3.9 million people, I think, actually, have 9 million people, I think, actually, have 30% or so of the world's GDP. So it does not make sense to bet against America. That doesn't mean all our policies are smart or anything, but I do not get pessimistic on the country. You know, I worry about the big worry is what can be done by either terrorists or governments that have access to nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons. But in terms of the basic economics of the country, your children are going to live better than you live, and your grandchildren are going to live better than your children live. I have seen more people pass up opportunities because they get focused on a single economic variable or a single problem that the country faces, and they forget about the good things. I mean, if you can buy very good businesses at attractive prices, it's crazy to say, I think I'll sit this out because it might get a little cheaper next year or something of the sort, and because the world's going to go to hell. We've never operated that. We've never decided not to buy a business we like because of a macro view, have we?
Not yet.
Okay. There's no doubt about it that there is far more money looking at deals now than 5 years ago, and they're willing to pay up more for the good but mundane businesses that we've been successful at buying in the past. And you mentioned the private equity firms, and they're bigger than ever. the hedge funds have gotten into the game to some degree. And if someone is auctioning off a business today, this has changed just very slightly in the last 4 or 5 weeks because of some change in the junk bond market, but not in any significant degree. There were people lined up to bid on almost anything. In fact, you have private equity firms selling their businesses to other private equity firms, and there are a lot of companies sold to someone who's buying them to resell in a fairly short period of time. We can't compete in that field, and that's a source of distress to us, but that's the way it is. It won't go on forever in our view. We still occasionally, as this deal I mentioned to you, party on the other side, and we made a deal that did not go through an auction process. And we see that occasionally, but we don't see it anything like we saw it 4 or 5 years ago. So in terms of the near-term outlook for Berkshire, in terms of doing what it's important that we find it extraordinary, both Charlie and I have over the decades, just how fast things can change. There have been at least 3 times, maybe more, where it's looked to me in my own career where it looked like there was so much money sloshing around that it would be impossible to do intelligent things with money. And I actually terminated a partnership back at the end of 1969 because I felt that the money was coming out, of the woodwork. There were all kinds of people that wanted to use it and compete, and I just didn't feel we could do intelligent things. Within 4 years, I saw the greatest opportunities that I've ever seen in my lifetime, and we've had several experiences like that. In 1998, when long-term capital management got in trouble in the fall of 1998 and other things were happening, you had incredible opportunities available in the investment world. Now, people were just as smart then. They had all these people with 150 IQs running around, and they actually had money. But the world became paralyzed for a short period.
E quindi qual è il loro segreto? Beh, direi di avere la pazienza di un predatore, ma il coraggio di agire quando tutti gli altri sono terrorizzati. Loro si posizionano sul lungo termine, sull'incredibile capacità di un paese come gli Stati Uniti di creare ricchezza, nonostante i 1000 problemi del momento. Ignorano tutti quanti i rumori di fondo, le crisi passeggere, le previsioni catastrofiche, perché come ha detto Charlie Munger, lo avete sentito, ha visto più persone perdere occasioni per essersi concentrate su un singolo problema che per qualsiasi altra ragione. E così oggi, mentre il mondo corre freneticamente, loro sono fermi, aspettano, non perché sono pessimisti, ma perché sono tremendamente ottimisti sul fatto che prima o poi la follia del mercato offrirà loro un'altra occasione d'oro. E quel giorno saranno pronti. Bene, lasciami qui sotto un commento per dirmi se condividi questo approccio, questa strategia, se ti stai comportando come loro, se stai facendo diversamente. Un like se il video ti è piaciuto, iscriviti al canale se ancora non l'hai fatto. Grazie mille e buoni investimenti a tutti.